Kendrick Lamar halftime show was a big display on how America views black people. Having Samuel.
Let's talk about this BS in this guy's video and what a bullshitter he is, and how people, dudes like this, don't want to talk about the root cause of the main problem that the black community faces, and nobody ever wants to talk about it because they don't have the balls to talk about it and commit blasphemy against the real perpetrators. So everybody's talking about Kendrick Lamar's halftime show, how it's symbolic, the revolution will be televised. Kendrick Lamar is like a millionaire saying, you can't hold me down. He's up there freely speaking the way that he wants to speak. Who's the people who are really struggling? Your average everyday Joe. What do people get out of the halftime speech except like some sermon that stirs people up, but they don't want to do anything about it? Or some, like I talk about in a lot of my videos, your personal trainer gives you an exercise regimen. You're all excited about how that worked for them, and you could do that, and you go sit on your ass and do nothing. The number one problem facing the black community and black poverty and economic empowerment with black folks, the number one problem, just look at the statistics. If you have, this goes for everybody. And the number one enemy to the black community is black mothers. I said that. Now, ballless simps like this would never ever say that. Now, there's people out there saying it, but they don't get the loudest voice. And everybody loves an emotional little high. Oh, Kendrick, look at what he did, and this and that, and whatever. You know, I thought that the Serena part was a funny, cute little, diss because, Drake was his ex, they dated and stuff like that. And, whatever. But nobody cares about the real answer and solution. Everybody's talking shit about, the revolution will be televised and this and that, and hot political stuff and symbolism. How does that help you in everyday life? How? What's going to happen? How come everybody's talking all this vague symbolism and no practical answers? The number one enemy to the black community is not having intact married families and kids growing up in them. If you go back to the civil rights era, about 80% of black kids were born into a married family. Black families were doing better than white families for periods of time in the late 1800s through the 1900s. And of course, you had Black Wall Streets, entire black-only infrastructures, their own town. The Tulsa one, they have their own airport, their own banking system, their own infrastructure. And there's some groups of people who are trying to get back to that. And some groups of people said, we never should have forced integration. We should have let it organically happen as people's hearts changed. And people's hearts are a lot different than they were during the civil rights era when cops could spray down black folks with hoses and dogs just for protesting peacefully, or arresting Martin Luther King or Malcolm X or whatever. But you have a 95% chance of never going into poverty if you graduate from high school. This goes for everybody. Graduate from high school, get married, and have kids after you're married. What changed when black families, 80% of them were intact in the 60s, and kids were born into a black family? You know what changed? White supremacists, white Democrats, and this guy gets political and tries to talk, left wing, right wing, and it's the same stupid bird, and you're getting bamboozled like a little tricked out hoe, picking one side of the welfare plantation, slavery, the Klan, civil rights. The Democrats were always the ones perpetrating that or against civil rights. So what happened, and I'm not taking one side on this because, Republicans have a history of being outrightly racist and blatant with it. Democrats are worse, like Malcolm X said. Go watch Malcolm X, what Malcolm X says about white liberals and what Malcolm X says about sellouts. Putting a black puppet out there like Jesse Jackson or Al Sharpton that talks about civil rights and gives them a platform to keep black folks in check. It's the Willie Lynch letter. You ever read the Willie Lynch letter? Hey, dude, over here. You ever read the Willie Lynch letter? Because here's what happened. The people really keeping black folks in check are black mothers. So after the civil rights era, white supremacists were like, well, we can't just be blowing up towns like Black Wall Street in Oklahoma. And there were dozens of them across the country. Black folks, just like any other history or culture or group of people in the history of the world, you leave them alone, they flourish. And black folks did it at a miraculous level. Out of slavery, one generation later, 50% of black folks were reading. They had a 50% literacy rate. That's a modern day miracle according to linguists. So the real issue is just to leave people alone in general and let them thrive, but do it with the basic foundational fundamental thing in humanity and God's design for humans is the family. When we let our kids go off to public schools, the public schools brainwash our kids to think all this, oh, you know, you're a boy, not a girl, and we're going to give you puberty blockers behind your parents' approval, whatever. When the government gets involved, things get screwy. When the family stays the family, 99% of folks have a conscience and have morals, and they raise their kids right. What's happening now? In the black community, almost 75 to 80% of kids are born without a father in the home. 50% of white kids are like that. 40% of Latinos. Every statistic shows that a child suffers or ends up suicidal, gangbanging, on drugs, dropping out of school, criminality, teenage pregnancy, depression, mental illness. The number one predicting factor is whether there's a father in the home. So what happened when black folks had 80% of black families had a dad in the home full time? How come it's flipped around? Because black women took the government cheese bait. The Willie Lynch letter, let's break up the family from within. We can't blow up black churches anymore. We can't get away with blow up entire black infrastructures in cities. Let's dangle government cheese to a black woman. And they took it hook, line, and sinker. If you look at interviews, I just saw some interviews on 60 Minutes or something. They're interviewing black women in like the 70s, and there was this explosion of single mother homes. Don't you think you should have a father or have a kid with the father? Oh, I could do it on my own, strong and independent, this and that. Women utterly fail at raising families, protecting families, and being the leader of the family. You cannot provide male affirmation for a young boy as a mother. If everybody waits until marriage to have kids, do whatever you want, get as many STDs as you want, being a buck wild freak. I don't give a crap. That's your own stupid, dangerous, idiotic, animalistic, low-level lifestyle for anybody. But this guy and everybody else, oh, the culture, the revolution is going to be televised. Man, nobody's going to do anything, just like nobody does anything in the father's rights movement. And he's talking about, oh, Samuel Jackson there's all the symbolism of the enemy, and the enemy's doing this. Who's your enemy? Look at all the successful black folks who grew up with a father in the home or an intact family, or who just fought and overcame that stuff. Look at all the success stories. The average American is richer than 80% of the population in the rest of the world. And we still want to play victims and stuff. And then we still want to play this Willie Lynch letter. So here goes a guy, a little puppet being dangled like a house slave to everybody to push everybody victimhood. The single mother is the number one enemy of the black family. But let's look the other way. Let's look to white folks and white infrastructure, white this and white that. And there's plenty of vestiges of that. You're never going to get rid of it. But you're saying you're incapable of growing some balls and actually overcoming it? Yeah, because you start off with a disadvantage because you got mental health problems because you had a mother beat the snot out of you, or a mother neglecting you and letting you play video games your whole life, or a mother not there to give you male affirmation. Especially, you know, who can raise a boy better than a man? Who can teach a daughter how a man should treat you like a gentleman and not to give out or give it up or give him your little flower before it's time? I see women let their kids of all races, you know, get on TikTok and be raised with their cell phone and talk to boys too early, or talk to somebody online, or, you know, joke around in the neighborhood, and they're all booty clapping and they're 7 years old. All this disgusting stuff that no father would allow their daughters to do. And a young black boy, who can help guide him through American life other than a black father? And they're pushed out because mothers abuse the court system, the white supremacist court system, that's tied in with feminism. You know, feminism, coincidentally, came and crossed the civil rights era. There's a great argument that it was a distraction. And it taught women to be strong and independent and pushed the fathers out. And now we have a radical feminist anti-father court system, and we have a bunch of punk little bitch men who won't stand up for themselves and fight for custody of their kids. Or they say, oh, the mother's got me on child support, so that's a court order, so I can't get custody, when child support has nothing to do with custody. We all punk out like a bunch of bitches because we're raised by a bunch of single moms to be feminine little simps. Dude, talk about the real root of the problem first, then talk about everything else. Stop bullshitting and bamboozling everybody. Utter bullshit.